My name is Ekwa Msangi. I am a writer, director, filmmaker based out of New York, and so pleased to be here today with the team, the wonderful, brilliant team that's brought us The Watermen, starting with director, producer, and actor, David Oyelowo. Welcome. Alfred Molina, who's also one of the actors in the film. Welcome. And Carla Gardini, who is one of the producers for The Watermen. Welcome as well. So happy to have you. So I feel like a good place to start would be how this script came across your desk, and what it was that took you and made you decide to take this journey as your directorial debut. David.
Thank you. Thanks, Ekwa. Yeah, it was one of those rare situations whereby the very thing I was looking for did indeed cross my desk. You know, I'm a father of 4, and I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And the combination of those two things led me to wanting to see this kind of film. I grew up loving, as a lot of us did, E.T. But The Goonies was another big favorite of mine. Films like Willow, The Never-Ending Story, Stand By Me. There were a plethora of films that had young people as the protagonists going through tough things in reality, but were coping with them through fantasy and imagination. And I just felt such a sense of identification with those characters. But I never really saw myself represented in those films. And having 4 kids myself, and in a bid to share that kind of film with them, I always found myself having to go back to the 80s and 90s to watch those films. And although we loved watching them together, I found myself wondering, why am I not seeing anything of this nature now? They were such seminal films, and they are perennial. They are timeless. You're still gonna, they've aged so well. And so I talked to my agents and I said, is there anything remotely in this space out there by way of a script? And it coincided with The Waterman coming onto the blacklist, the top 100 unproduced screenplays in Hollywood in any given year. This was 2015. They sent me The Waterman. I remember exactly the plane ride I was on when I read this thing, and I thought, oh my goodness, lightning in a bottle. And so I then went on this journey of trying to get a hold of this script. And that's when I approached the wonderful Oprah Winfrey, who's a very good friend of mine, someone who I really share a sensibility with, and Carla Gardini, who's here with us, helps Oprah run Harpo Films. And so thankfully, Oprah responded to it. Carla and I then began our journey of trying to put this, trying to get this film. And that's when we approached Emma Nidell, who thankfully, despite there being a major studio and other folks wanting to get hold of the film, she really bought into our vision for it. And that's where the journey began.
Oh, that's wonderful. And maybe Carla and then, excuse me, and Alfred could say a little bit about, when David approached you with this project, aside from his charm and wit, what is it that drew you to the project, or, sort of resonated with you as well?
Well, I'm always looking for original storytelling. I am not IP obsessed. So the fact that David and I responded to the language on the page and the writing, and then was able to have a quality conversation with Emma Nidell where we really understood what was informing this story. She grew up on a cattle ranch, very rural setting, young girl, lonely, no friends, and she would entertain herself exploring in the woods. And she found magic all around her. And the more that she shared these very poignant, very visceral anecdotes about her childhood, we just saw it all teleported on the page. And it galvanized us to really want to make a mark with this script, which is wholly original, how to, support it, find the financing, get it off the ground, and produce it responsibly and in an innovative way that subverts expectations.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Alfred? What was exciting for you about this?
Well, I got involved. David and I have been friends for a while, and this is our fourth time of working together, actually.
Yep.
And I always like to correct when people talk about David's directorial debut. I always like to correct them slightly by saying it's his directorial debut on a full-length feature. He actually directed a short, which I took part in. What a cast, by the way! That was a good cast too. Anyway, so when David called me and said, "Look, I've got this script. I'm excited about it. There's a part in it. I'd love you to consider it. Would you give it a read?" I read it, and all the reasons that David has expressed, as well as Carla, for their enthusiasm for the script, all the reasons that the way that it spoke to them, it kind of spoke to me too. I love this kind of genre, and when David was watching Goonies and E.T. when he was a youngster, I was watching those movies as an adult and loving them equally. So I could see where it was going. I could see I could visualize it. That happens sometimes with scripts. You can actually see what the film might look like, and that's to do with the quality of the writing, the strength of the story, and so on. The vibrancy of the characters, and all of that was there. It was all apparent, and David's enthusiasm for it is obviously a huge factor. One never goes into a film when the director's kind of going, "Yeah, well, it's okay. You fancy doing it,
I guess
it's not exactly that sort of attitude isn't exactly conducive to anything."
true.
But he clearly responded to the material and felt it spoke to him in a very particular way, a very singular way. And I was just delighted to kind of come along for the ride, I'm very proud of the film in that regard, because it comes from love. The film comes from the writer's deep sort of knowledge and understanding of the natural world, this response that she had to her environment when she was younger, David's passion for it. All of these things are as important in a script as the actual thing itself. Somehow that's what creates the atmosphere in which we can do our best work, and I was very fortunate that I was there. My little bit in the movie, we shot the first 2 or 3 days of filming.
Oh, wow.
So I was there right from the start, so that was kind of a treat.
You got to see the magic as it was sprouting and blooming.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And one of the things that struck me, there's a lot of really resonant and important themes that I saw in the film to do with environmental issues, global warming, for example, a father-son relationship, having, like you said, you've never seen, it's not often that we get to see ourselves as Black people in those roles, sort of experiencing ourselves in the world in the way many others do, or have had the opportunity to do so. So having not only a Black lead, like a young boy who's a Black lead, but a really smart, really curious, he's just naturally curious. He's not a superhuman of any sort. He's just a normal kid who happens to be African American, and happens to, have all these plans and things of that nature. But there was a lot of things that sort of really struck to me, and at the core of it, just thinking about that, it's this father and son who are also trying to figure out how to work on grief together. And I wondered if you could say something about that, and maybe what that aspect of it might have meant to you.
Yeah, it's one of the themes that I identified and identify with the most. I have 3 sons and a daughter, and I am one of 3 sons. And as a child, I had a complicated relationship with my father. It was a beautiful, he's since passed away, but he was an amazing father. But culturally and quite typically of a Nigerian father, he couldn't really understand the notion of an artistic son. He was more academia oriented, and that's the thing he aspired to for his children. And having a son who was into painting and drawing and sculpture and acting was something that was a bit confusing for him. And it wasn't necessarily a source of dysfunction, but it was definitely a source of curiosity for him. How did that come from me, kind of thing? And you see that a little bit in the relationship between Amos, my character, and Gunnar, as played by Lonnie. Then you factor in as well the fact that, my character has been in the Navy. So there's this geographical separation, which of course leads to an emotional separation. So my son has grown up a lot with his mother and without me there. And that naturally creates a kind of a divide. And I had that with my dad. We moved back from Nigeria to the UK, and for 4 years my dad was sort of working out a contract, and in that time the dynamics of my family really changed before he was then with us again. I'm an actor, so I'm on set a lot of the time. I see that in my relationship with my kids. Sometimes after having been away for a while, it takes a while to sort of warm the relationship back up. And so these are all things that both as a son and as a father I really relate to. But, the other thing I loved about the film is that it shows that dysfunction in a relationship doesn't have to exclude love or fighting for your family. Sometimes in movies, we get quite primary colored with it. Okay, so there's dysfunction, that means he's a bad dad and the son's gonna try and figure it out. Or they're a wonderful family with love is just prevalent, and so everything is kumbaya. Well, most families, the two kind of uncomfortably coexist. You then add in illness and being the only Black family in this community, and all of the pressures that brings. I think there are universal themes, there are specific themes, but definitely ones that I relate to. And I just love this element that despite all of that, the film is about this father and son who are pointing in opposite directions, this mother who is facing this challenging illness, trying to bring her husband and son together. And through the course of the film, in a very circuitous way, they do find themselves back to each other in a way that is far stronger than may have ever been the case without those challenges they were facing.
Yeah. And it's interesting, actually, as you're speaking, it's reminding me to the fact that, for Alfred Molina's character, there was also a father-son element in terms of like the narration of that, where, it was his father who had told him the story, and therefore he was able to sort of, share it with Gunnar, the Gunnar character, and what that meant that your father had told you. And this was something that, your character, Alfred Molina, had sort of tried to find and was also equally as fascinated with, but I'd kind of, I guess, given up on that. And I wondered if there was anything there that was symbolic or inspirational for you as an actor, to sort of lean into that aspect of a father-son relationship as well.
So do you mean me, Ekwa?
Yes, I did.
Oh, yes. Well, that's interesting because that element of my character sort of and his relationship with his father, one of the things that struck me about that was how he has all this information that he inherited from his dad. He's been trying to make sense of it all his life. It's, in a sense, has completely defined him in terms of, where he lives emotionally and, perhaps even intellectually. And when this young man comes into his life and is asking him really quite a difficult question, I think, sort of, in a kind of subtextual way. And what it releases in my character is this moment where he starts talking in a very intimate way about his father and about what he went through and what he left him with and so on. And that, I have to admit, the the depth of that didn't really hit me until after we filmed that scene, which was kind of which in a way was frustrating, but it was also I was glad in a way, because had it occurred to me before, it might have really, it might have really sort of changed. It would have hindered me, I think, in a way. Right. But it just showed how powerful that subtext is, and I think it certainly applies to nearly every male friend I've got, where there's a kind of, as David rightly said, there's love and dysfunction, and it all exists at the same time. I don't know whether it's the same thing applies to daughters and mothers. I'm not sure, but certainly with that kind of, that whole notion of male bonding, and how, to what extent is it useful, and when does it become toxic, or when does it become sort of negative, and all of that, and all of that's playing in the movie. All of it is playing, even in tiny little moments. There are tiny moments. There's a tiny moment when my character comes to Amos to say, look, I think this is my fault. I gave him some info. I didn't realize he was going to go away, and that suddenly, just that moment changes everything. It changes everything for Amos, and it kind of changes everything for my character too, because I think there's a kind of, it's a mistake that he made, and it's a mistake that his father made as well. So it's kind of it's how we, the sins that, the sin. I hate using the word sin. I hate using that phrase, sins of the father. That's not right, but certainly the experiences of the father will often land on the shoulders of the son.
And the Jo, I think her name is Jo, the young girl, she's also having experience with her father. That sort of is a storyline that plays through. So a lot of father relationships that were in there. Very much according to what you were saying, inspired you to take the movie on to begin with. For Carla, I'm curious as to, I don't know that Harpo has been in the business of making a lot of family movies, children's movies. To me, I looked at it almost like a kid's movie, but it very much is definitely, I guess, a family film as well. And I wondered if that's something that was one of the things that was exciting for you. Is that a direction that Harpo wants to go into, maybe a little bit more? And I guess sort of conversations about what families look like, as we've discussed here. There's a lot of different components. It's not just one or the other. It's just total bliss or total disaster. But I guess the layers and the complications, and the fact that our families, what we saw as family movies growing up, which was, father, mother, the kid, the dog, the picket fence, was sort of a very standard display of what a family should look like. But I think our families look very different these days, and I'm curious as to where, what, as a producer, and certainly for the company, where that may interest you.
Well, first and foremost, we are always looking for stories that expand the consciousness, and above all else, exquisite. So we have to feel something, and as I've said before, we felt it on the page. And then when David decided to take this on as his directorial debut, his voice, this new layer of detail, and he was always going for the truth, always going for the bone marrow truth, always pushing scenes, always interrogating choices. It only made us more excited that we were going to have an opportunity to do something specifically in this young adult genre, which, you're right, we haven't traditionally focused on. And it's really by, that hasn't been a choice. It's just that we're not volume producers, and our GPS is just following what is good and what is a good use of our muscle to help protect process and help responsibly protect the intention and David's vision. So my hope for sure, especially in the times that we've been living in, is that this opens the door for us to continue to make films and television series that are not only in this genre that is multi-generational, because as you've pointed out, there are a lot of adult themes being tackled here. And, you know, David and I would often revisit the Pixar film Up and how it was so bold and unapologetic in portraying grief and the world that we live in, and that not only do adults have to continue to prepare themselves for those pivotal moments, but so do our children. And that's the level of storytelling, that kind of sophisticated storytelling that we're interested in. And we love the idea of parents, grandparents, peers, kids, getting something out of that story. So you know, as David said, it's evergreen and you want to keep revisiting it.
Yeah. That's really wonderful. One of the other things that struck me, David, that I thought was really interesting about this story was that it's a boy who's terrified by water, and yet he's going after the waterman, literally. And you know, and you know, I mean, to me, one of the main themes was also about just confronting your deepest fears, and how he seemed even braver than his parents were, or any of the adults were, in terms of just like, yes, I'm afraid of this thing, but it's really important for me to go after this, and so I'm just gonna go. I'm as prepared as I can be. I have my little yellow backpack with all the stuff. And I'm gonna do my best and go after it. And it somehow it inspires his father later on. But it was one of those things, I wrote it down like, he's terrified of water, but he's going after the waterman. That's actually really beautiful. And wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. You know, one of the biggest themes of the film, and certainly the aspect of human beings I most admire, is sacrificial love. You know, there's a beautiful verse that says, "Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friend." And to see an 11-year-old who loves his mother so much that he is going to risk life and limb to get to what he deems to be some kind of cure or answer to her plight, I think that's what love is. That's what true love looks like. And then you see the father doing that for the son also. And you know that mother, as played by Rosario Dawson, would do the same for her husband and her son. And that is what I mean by love and dysfunction coexisting. You know, you see these fissures between them, but you also see magnificent, magnanimous displays of love that you can root for. And so by the end of the movie, you're really wanting this family to find some kind of togetherness again. And that, in a sense, is also what the waterman represents. The waterman represents hope. The waterman represents a kind of an answer beyond the love that is present. And I think that sometimes that's the mistake we make. We think that love and the answer to our need for love is far away and something to scale a mountain to find. And sometimes you miss the fact that it's right there on your doorstep if you will just look into the eyes of that person you've been blessed with and go, oh my goodness, you are all I need. And the fact is, we are not promised tomorrow. So let us make the most of today. And I think that's the lesson that this 11-year-old kid learns through the course of the journey. And I just think that's just such a universal, specific, and sophisticated thing for an 11-year-old to learn. And I think it's what those great films I mentioned earlier do as well. Like E.T., the beginning of that film is about a family who are looking down the barrel of the father having left. what are we going to do now? You know, the Goonies, their community is about to be decimated. All of these friendships that have been cultivated in their young lives, they're about to, some developers coming in and they're all going to have to go their separate ways. Stand By Me, you see the protagonist, his parents are dealing with the grief and loss of his older brother, and they're off to go and find a dead body. You know, we sometimes forget that those classic films are steeped in this really quite intense thing that kids are facing, and they feel the fear and do it anyway. And that's why they are defined by the notion of being a rites of passage. Those kids are fundamentally changed from what they were at the beginning of the film to where they are at the end. And it's because they go on this journey that is tends to do with sacrifice. They have a goal, and we are going to face that fear, and we are going to get through, you know, fears imagined and real, and come to a place whereby, you know, what we believe in has either been affirmed or redefined at the end of the movie. And I just find that really, really moving.
Speaking of rites of passage, and I'm just gonna keep going unless somebody else has a question here. But speaking of rites of passage, this being your featured directorial debut, well, how was the experience, and do you see yourself doing more?
It was an amazing, amazing experience, and I think the reasons why is a combination of being blessed with really amazing collaborators, having had a career whereby I've worked with truly astounding directors who I've used as my film school, but also having been on some pretty hellacious sets as well and learnt from those bad experiences.
What not to do.
Yeah, exactly, what not to do. And also taking the advice of some directors who are still very much in my life and who I went to when I knew I was going to be doing this. And I said to them, you know, give me the tips, you know, what, and the universal thing was hire great people who know more than you. You're the newbie on this. Try and make sure you're the only one who's and then don't micromanage them. You know, let them bring their talent, be very clear with your vision, and watch them elevate it and make you look good. And in all honesty, that's the advice I took, and that's what happened. And I am such a lover of storytelling. And I feel like for us as filmmakers, and I include everyone, whether it's actors, producers, writers, directors, caterers, you know, whoever, you know, anyone involved in making movies, it's such a privileged position because of how culturally impactful movies are. I mean, I am talking about how those films impacted me as a kid. They shaped my worldview for better and for worse. You know, partly why I want The Waterman to exist is because even though I loved those films, I want my kids and my grandkids to now see those narratives played out with a myriad of kinds of people, so that we can all picture a world where we are at the center of our narratives. And so, you know, to be part of that is such a privilege, I think. And I really just like dove in feet first in terms of, okay, even if I only get to craft one feature film in my entire life, I want it to be representative of the values I have. And they are love. They are, you know, what do you do with loss? They are my African heritage. So down to the costume design, to some of the music, to encouraging my composer to use not necessarily African music, but African instruments to imbue the score with my experience, so that I feel like it's very much emanating from that. And then hopefully the universal is found in the specific. So it was truly beautiful to be able to not just pay lip service to that, but to literally do it. Because as a producer, I have seen how the perspective governing the story absolutely dictates what the story is itself. That's why you need a myriad of different kinds of people telling stories, so that we are getting this rich kind of smorgasbord of stories. This story told by a white man, by a Native American woman, by whoever, is different.
Yeah.
Not better or worse, just different. And that is something to be celebrated. And I just loved getting to do my version of this story.
And I will also add, I noticed that you had some of your family members involved in not only the music, but acting as well, which I saw your lovely wife was one of the characters in the film, which was wonderful. I'm assuming it was a pleasure to work together and that she did.
It was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. No, it was great. You know, it's a family film about family. It reflects my family. She's a great actress. My son is a music producer. You know, Oprah is like a mother to me. Alfred and I have done 4 films together. Carla and I have been in the trenches on so many things we've tried to develop before. It was a real, and that's what I think. Certainly my best experiences on a film set, for better or for worse, have felt like family. And you need to have a high level of comfort with the people you're making a film with in order to be brave. You know, being on a Chris Nolan set, being on an Ava DuVernay set, being on a Steven Spielberg set, all phenomenal actors, but there is phenomenal directors, but there is a shorthand. I mean, to see Steven Spielberg with Janusz Kaminski, they one word type communications, and he is changing the lens. You know, when I'm being directed by Ava DuVernay, I know what the note is by the way she says the word cut. You know, we've got to that level of understanding. Fred and I, we did As You Like It together. He was in my film Big Guy. We did a film called Don't Let Go, which I also produced. And the fact of the matter is, when I called him up and I said, oh yeah, I'm going to be directing this movie, what he actually said to me was, well, if you have need of a fat Italian to stand in a doorway, I'll be there. I'll be there. I said, well, no fat Italians in our movie, but you know, there is this quirky character that I think you could do well with. But you know, that's the nature of the relationship, and I think you sort of see that manifest on the screen.
It definitely does. I have a few questions / comments here from the audience. A lot of praise for the film. Christina says how much she appreciates your film, and Ravi Chopra says it's a wonderful, heartwarming film, which echoes his favorite E.T. Love the music and sound mix, and wants you, David, to talk a little bit about the sound mix work that was done in the scene where Gunnar arrives at the Waterman's house. There was a lot of tension and anticipation in that scene, for sure.
Oh gosh, I love that people pick up on those details. Well, you know, firstly, to talk about the music, our composer, Peter Bart, you know, what a story. You know, I met him under the most crazy circumstances. I was doing a narration for a children's book in Belgium while I was shooting there, and this guy says to me that, oh, by the way, I'm also a film composer. And I was like, get out of here, press record on the button and let me do Spot the Dog. You know, I was literally recording Spot the Dog with him, for goodness sake. You know, and then, you know, I emailed him that evening and said, oh, by the way, my wife's in here in Brussels at the moment. Do you have any recommendation for restaurants? So of course, now he has my email address, and then he keeps emailing me saying, by the way, you know, I am a composer. And then he read about me doing, you know, the Waterman, and he goes, I hear you're doing the Waterman. I am a composer, you know. And I was like, look, dude, the Spot the Dog guy is not going to be doing the score for my movie. And, you know, through a myriad of, I mean, this guy, this is how persistent he was. He went and I eventually sent him the script. Off his own back, he recorded 8 tracks with an orchestra inspired by reading the script, sent them to me. I was so haunted by them, couldn't shake them. As I finished the film, I started having my editor just cut in bits of music from the Spot the Dog guy. And I was like, we're not even having to edit. It's like fitting perfectly. So I called him up. I said, okay, fine. You're scoring the movie. He was on a plane in 2 days to LA. And that's how Peter Bart came to score the film. And it was just the most incredible experience. He just absolutely got the tone of the film. As you know, with the sound design, in all honesty, I had a very, very clear perspective on what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. And I just had great people surrounding me. It was tricky though, because we did a lot of the post during the pandemic. And so I couldn't be in the room doing the sound mix, doing the DI, you know, all of our orchestra had to record their instruments separately, you know, a 20-piece orchestra. Then we had to sort of put all those tracks together. So it was challenging, but it did mean that I had to be even more fastidious, you know, as I was putting the film together. So, you know, and I learned about detail from, you know, Ava was a great source of information for me. One of the great pieces of advice she gave me is that she said earlier on in her career as a director, she said she made the mistake of, when she would direct a scene with lovers in it, she would direct it like a love story. When she had action going on, she would direct it like an action movie. When it was dramatic, she would sort of have that kind of thought around it. Okay, this is a dramatic film, so let me imbue it with that. And she said it wasn't until Selma that she went, no, the theme of the movie is overcoming obstacle, and that is the thing to apply to every character, every scene, and the film in its totality. And she said, figure out what the theme of your movie is and apply that with rigor to every aspect of that film. And it was just like, whoa. I mean, what a gem. You could go 10 movies deep before you realize that. And so that went into the, you know, that went into the score, that went into the sound design, that went into the costume. You know, I wanted it to be an adventure for the whole family. And that informed so much of what I did.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you were able to draw upon those, and that it sounds like you're saying we should be expecting some more work from you in the future, maybe somehow, possibly.
Oh, God willing. Well, Alfred needs work, so you know, I need to keep directing just to keep him going. You know, so.
So I can use my real accent. I'm sick and tired of being English all of the time.
Exactly. We're doing an Italian film next time. No, for sure.
Aquaman.
Done. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. No, I would love to do more. I mean, I had such a great time. But the great thing about the fact that I'm blessed to have a day job, which is being an actor and a producer as well, is that I'm going to be very picky with what I do, because it, you know, it's 2 years of your life. And you know, it's got to be a film that you're, as you know, Ekwa, you know, having seen your unbelievably beautiful film Farewell Amor, I know that film had to have taken, you know, so much of your life to create. And so the ones you choose to do, you better love them, because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. And so, you know, the next one I want to spend a lot of time with is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, wonderful. As I tell people who've also coming from an African family, and sort of people being confused about why you don't have a PhD yet, it's like the films I make are like every film is a PhD. The amount of research and development and the shooting and the editing and the finishing and it's literally the kind of time that I would spend on PhD. So hopefully I will make many PhDs in my life.
Amen.
And I hope that you do as well.
I want to see those, Ekwa. I love your work. Thank
you. Congratulations. It's a very, very beautiful film, very heartwarming, very just smart, you know, and a lot of really, really beautiful themes that I'm excited to see this being shared with the world. I'm excited about the world being able to see this iteration and from your imagination, and with these wonderful cast members that you have and crew that have joined in, you could really see everyone's sort of work come together there, and the family aspect that you discussed here is very, very evident in the work. So congratulations to all of you for putting that together and finishing in the midst of a pandemic too. That's not something to be scoffed at. This has been, we were chatting a little bit earlier with Carla about the joys and pains of making films in this particular time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would be remiss not to mention, our amazing financiers, Shivhan's, Shivani Rawat's company, who fully financed the film. I mean, as a first-time director, to have all that money, all that support, Monica Levinson, Connor Flanagan as well, who produced this alongside myself and Carla, Shivani Rawat and her support, and then RLJ, who distributed the film theatrically during a pandemic and on VOD, and now Netflix is distributing it internationally. I mean, we didn't know which path it would go. We've had a theatrical release, a VOD release, and now a streaming release concurrently, and millions of people are seeing the film. I mean, I'm getting letters every day that make me cry, with the reaction. And that's the toughest thing about independent film, is that you just don't know if anyone's going to see it. So when it works, and they do, and they like it, that's our drug. That's what foolishly makes us want to do it again and again. And but this one definitely has me hooked. And so, I can't thank Carla and Fred enough for joining me for the ride, and everyone, and Matt Lloyd, who shot it as well. It's a beautiful looking film also, so anyway, just so many people to thank, including you, Ekwa.
Thank you. And for anyone who's joining us today who hasn't seen the film yet, I would advise you to run, not walk, to find it. It's really, really beautiful. There are horses in the film. There's for a first feature, by the way, we can talk about this later, but it is not a small, you didn't do like the small sort of two people talking to each other in the L of the room. It's quite an ambitious project as well, but really, really beautifully executed. So congratulations to you all. Thank you, BAFTA, for having us and for supporting this. And just very excited to have this join, the pantheon of young adventure quest movies, young adult adventure quest movies in the world. I'm very, very excited for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bless you.